Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here. I want to do a finished video for the Thea 1 Shadow Swamp build, and note that this build is most likely going to get big nerfed next season, so play it while you can. They've already said that it's kind of being affected by some bugs here. You might notice in the background that we are occasionally ticking for 15.5 Q, which I believe is the actual damage cap for Shadow Swamp. And the amount of damage you'll see here will kind of vary depending on a couple features. But if I like go and switch my pets from being Magic Find pets to being DPS pets and then reset, the damage won't really go up. Like it doesn't, the only time I've ever seen it go above 15.5 Q is it did 16 Q. And I think pretty much what we're seeing is how many instances of 500 billion damage ticks you're getting in a particular time window of Shadow Swamp, and so changing between pets and stuff like doesn't actually increase the damage, which is pretty crazy. And I know a lot of people talk about how Thea 1 is kind of like slow to ramp up, but the damage here is absolutely monstrous, and especially like you can just very easily get the whole damage going. So I'm going to talk about real quick how you snapshot. You have two buffs up here, this orange buff and this blue buff. And this orange buff basically is going to be probably the more difficult one for you to get, all the way up to 20 stacks. And typically this will happen like right as it's about to tick over. There'll be a period of time where you have two buffs kind of overlapping together and gives you 20 stacks. And when that happens, you want to activate your Star Stalker. The Star Stalker gives you a buff and gives this little yellow circle around an enemy. And then we're going to cast Shadow Swamp. And then Shadow Swamp is going to start scaling up and doing bonkers amounts of damage. As you can see, within like 5 seconds there, we've went from barely doing any damage to capping the dummy, and it's just ticking for a whole ton. And so that's how you like kind of get started in the beginning of a map, and then you just drag that forward using Shadow Shot. Now I do have the Shadow Shot automated now with a wind rhythm. I self found this one. It has like tier 2 cast thinger here in tier 1. I think this is probably like a couple hundred FE at this point in the league. But if you want something even cheaper, you can go with activation medium track. But you must have the modifier always locks on enemies within 20 meters, because this basically self-procs itself then. So it locks on enemies that are near you, and when you walk close to them, you shoot at them. And so this one works just as well. In terms of automating any of the other stuff, I would recommend automating Stone Skin. This basically gives us a huge shield as we run around, keeps us very safe. And I wouldn't really recommend automating Blurry Steps or Star Stalker. And the reason you don't want to automate Star Stalker is because you want to have it active when you snapshot, and then the rest of the time it doesn't matter. And so like you'll do the same amount of damage to a boss with Star Stalker attached to them or not. It's really kind of depending on how much damage modifiers you had when you put down the swamp on the ground, because you're dragging that forward the entire time. And kind of the rest of the stuff is pretty standard here. I'll just show it off real quick. I don't have anything super duper crazy. One thing to note is that like precise malleable is pretty nice. This makes it so that these are active when you're near an elite. I could get like precise stand with 1, which would help out and give me a little bit more damage. But at this point, it's just kind of not necessary. For our candles, we're using a quantity candle. This is one of the things that's going to get nerfed next season. These are not going to work anymore. And right now I have a Soul Eater candle, which just makes me move faster in maps. And in terms of the gear, like things are pretty good. Corrupted Marrow, I think, is pretty cheap still at this point. Max Terror Quantity is the most disgusting stat in the build, so you really can't get rid of this. I tried to replace this hat with this hat over here, which has a ton of Affliction Effect and Terror Charge stacks and 2 support skills, and we lost about 2/3 of our damage from this hat alone. So yeah, the max terror quantity thing is definitely a little bit bugged right now, and so you don't really want to get rid of Kingly Armor. You don't really want to get rid of Corrupted Marrow. The very best thing you could probably do is like get the Terra charge speed recovery down, but that would just allow you to switch out your Kingly Armor, which you don't want to do anyways. And I don't think that this has anything that's super duper important to get corrupted anyways. You could get the terror quantity and then I think skill duration together, which is okay. On my amulet here, we definitely should slam energy shield, not because we don't need sealed. Crossroads are really good for doing bossing. And then I highly recommend Praise for Injury for mapping. No, you do not need the physical damage to erosion, corrosion on here. That was just what I got. Boots, pretty standard. Rings, we have tenacity, blessing, and affliction is the most important part. And then went with a lot of elemental resistance and erosion. One of the rings does need fizz to fire, cold, and lightning. You need the cold and lightning here because you don't have any other way to apply those afflictions. Otherwise, we're going to get the fire affliction from our skills because you do need base burn in order to apply that. And then I've dreamed with the big dream onto this ring. We hit triggers corruption curse on hit, which is very nice, not mandatory at all, but this helps out a bunch. I got very lucky at this on the first try. And then the other ring is basically the same thing, just without the dream. And we did a little chair charge recovery. I could probably re-slam this ring at this point. I'm not going to be replacing the legendaries at all. And so we could get something different here. On our wands, we have erosion skill level, max terror charges, and affliction. These are kind of the big ones. We also have additional damage applied to life, spell skill level, and then reap's kind of nice. Like our reaps are capped, by the way, at 500 billion. And so adding more reap damage, like reap purification, a lot of people ask me about, doesn't help you at all. If you slap reap purification on this build from a slate, is not going to give you any more damage at all. Once your reaps are capping out at 500 billion, you can see that like on the dummy, it's a little pink number. You're pretty much going to be good to go. Now, talking about slates, we can go look at it real quick. Right now I'm using affliction and life conversion. This just allows me to seal more stuff. This makes our affliction more effective. Really, any slate that gives you like 30% additional damage would be just as good as affliction here. And then the rest of the slates have stuff like chance for physical damage to paralyze, chance to gain a tenacity and agility blessing when you get focus. This helps out a lot early on. I highly recommend trying to like rush this a little bit and going and getting one that gives you a chance to gain one stack of focus blessing upon inflicting damage to a frostbitten enemy. Between these two, your charges are going to go pretty crazy. Also, getting immediately starts energy shield charge on entering the low energy shield status is very nice, especially if you're farming God of Might. It's going to keep you safe. The rest here, we just have like owning stacks of additional blessings or increasing our max blessing. The ones that say like own for agility and tenacity don't increase the max, which means that you don't get the benefit of increasing your focus then as well. And then max focus. Really, my slates like aren't super duper crazy. We don't have any prairie or anything going on. It's pretty normal. The rest of the skill tree here, we'll just drag through it real quick. And I have both of these behind me. I'm just gonna switch to the other side. Ooh, there we go. TV magic. And then over here, we'll show these off real fast. There'll be a code for this all in the description as well, both a in-game and a max roll builder as well. And there we go. I think we were kind of like starting to put the final points into here. And yeah, that's kind of just my setup. If there's things that you aren't, liking or aren't comfortable with, you might want to change that. Stuff like this is kind of useful as well. And yeah, it's just this level 100 version. I've seen some people going and doing indifference as opposed to prelude. This makes your next main skill do more damage, and we drag that damage forward. So this is really important. Getting additional cooldown reduction doesn't really help you. There's one last thing that I want to say on slates. This is very important. Very important. This will take your build from doing a lot of damage to doing no damage. If you have additional horizontal penetration, it will not move your shadow swamp correctly, and it will brick your build. We have found one guy who was doing 0 damage. We couldn't figure out what was going on, and we realized that as he was hitting the dummy, the shadow shot was just going straight through it and wasn't moving the shadow swamp to the dummy, and he wasn't doing any damage. And once we took out the slate that had the penetration, everything was good. So do not get a slate with penetration for horizontal. Be very, very bad. Let's show some quick build here. I'll show a map and we'll do a POB 45. So I think we kind of pre-rolled up a map here. So I have a whole bunch of stuff. The only mods you really want to watch out for is I don't really like the ones that give you the bubbles on enemies and things that remove where's God of War? Things that remove blessings can be kind of scary. So as you go in, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to, use our Star Stalker and shoot. I stacked on 2 there for some reason, so I'm just actually going to recap again. And it goes pretty fast. The important thing is that you just want to always be hitting enemies as you're moving. And like our automation does that for us, obviously. But we kind of need to keep the Shadow Swamp alive. And so if you have to manually cast ahead a little bit, that does help out. This also does mean that things like movement speed does help out, because it, you know, allows you to move from pack to pack and maintain your Shadow Swamp the entire time. And as you can see, pretty easy, just absolutely blasting, annihilating with tons of damage, way more than you ever need. And yeah. Yeah, that's a map. That's about like kind of the normal experience there. And then in terms of boss damage, we could show this off. I'm still doing this with Magic Find setup, but you can snapshot using your DPS pets. So I'm going to wait for this to go all the way over. And I just snapshotted with my DPS pets. I'm switching back to Magic Find. And now as long as we click the thing in the center here fast enough, it will continue to use the snapshot where I was using my DPS pets the entire time. Which, was an interesting little mechanic there for sure. And really all we have to do is just kind of run around dodging attacks. Using the wind rhythm for the shadow shot, I think is a little bit superior, but it's, not necessary. It was a lot more expensive to get, but we ended up running our own month 7 anyways. It wasn't really all that hard. We basically face tanked and deleted the boss in seconds. And yeah, just kind of roaring through the maps here and roaring through the content. Now, what I'm expecting to see in the next season is they're going to remove the interaction that is making Terra quantity do anything for this. And they may or may not compensate the skill for that. Because without that, I think the skill's probably going to go from doing, breaking the dummy levels of damage to not really doing almost anything, which is kind of a shame. So hopefully in the patch notes, we'll, see something that they're going to help out the build, help out the skill. Or maybe they'll just like codify whatever the current bug is, but then reduce the numbers a little bit. Because I do think it is a little bit ridiculous. Like, we're not really super duper min-maxed, and we're doing like, we can't even increase the amount of damage that we do anymore. Our reaps are capped. Our Shadow Swamp is damage capped as well. Like, we can't hit any harder. We can't do any more damage. The only thing that we could do, or I could do to get more damage, would be to add a like more sources of reap. All right, so I'm gonna have to redo because my Shadow Swamp fell off the ground here. So there you go. And now it's stacking again. You can just watch his HP go down as the thing goes. So boop, 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 boop. And that wasn't with the DPS pets, right? There you go. Very quick path of building here. And yeah, that's the build. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a lot of fun with this Torchlight season. This will probably still work in preseason. And I think that this will probably be a fun build for preseason if it's still available. But yeah, we'll have to see. Thanks guys for hanging out. See you next time.